bit bigger. 710.
Hey everybody, welcome to the counter clipping stream. I have forgotten to do a whole bunch of stuff this week, and let's add a thing that, let's see here, because I made this card and I thought it was an awesome idea. And then by the time came to add it to the stream was already going. So I have this new currently clipping card that is showing what I am currently clipping, strangely enough. I want to make a currently drinking card as well, but that's actually a little more work. I already have cover images for games I'm working on, so I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by. Looks like we have a whole bunch of people here already. We are, as you can see, clipping the brand new, or pretty brand new, Indian Ocean region from Compass Games. These are, I want to say, 3/4 of an inch or 7/8 or something like that inch counters. They're pretty big. I am not at all sure that we are going to be able to fit these usefully into a counter tray. Nor am I sure how far we're going to get. I mean, there's a bunch of counter sheets here, but it's hard to keep track of because everything fell out of the sheets between me unboxing this thing and tonight. So, but nevertheless, the game looks very interesting. So, this is emblematic of the topic I have chosen in a way tonight. I also had to test this, by the way, because they're pretty thick counters, and I felt like it was a open question as to whether they were going to fit in the clipper or not. And I'm happy to report that they do. One of the topics that used to be popular, and as a way of prefacing our topic for the evening, is the whole hypothetical future conflict, right? And of course, the heyday of this topic was in the 70s and 80s. SPI did a lot of games on this topic. A bunch of other people did too. But I think we probably best remember the many entries of near future hypothetical stuff that we saw from SPI. A lot of which was NATO versus Warsaw Pact, but not all of it, right? I mean, you had the China War, which was the Chinese and the Soviets. We had Objective Moscow, which is everybody versus the Soviets. So there were a variety of those things. And we've recently seen a resurgence in interest in that topic, not in near future hypothetical stuff, but in sort of past future hypothetical stuff of Cold War gone hot in the late 70s or 80s. And I've mentioned that in the past. A bit confused by the color scheme on these counters, by the way. That we don't really see much in the way of near future hypothetical stuff for now, right? Stuff that, stuff like this or GMT's Next War series. There's some examples, but there's not that many actually. This is kind of it. I don't follow Modern War magazine, so it is plausible. Tell me that the stream is working, because I'm not seeing anything new in the chat for some time. Let's just verify that that's the case. Stuff like... yeah, everything looks fine. Am I losing chat? The pop-out chat. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Looks like the pop-out chat is busted. But can I pop it back in? Does that happen? No, but I can close it and pop it out again. Yeah, see, that's working. All right, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. This time it's on... well, last time it was on YouTube, too. So let me talk about the stream from last week, which had some technical problems. Those are technical problems that I think I can fix, and I just haven't had the time to get to it, because it's going to take me probably downloading the video and re-uploading it, which is not a big deal, but I just haven't had the time to do that. We will see the video from last week back up. I just haven't gotten to it yet. So, and I didn't manage to get to it over the weekend because I never get as much stuff done over the weekend as I hoped I was going to. Okay, so let me say hello to Charles Latour, Krusty Captain, Dale Brady, Daniel, Down in a Hole, Greg Grant, Grumpy Gamer, Jeff Beeler, Jeffrey Wesovich, Kaiser Bill, Ken Kloby, Lee Grant, Matt Taylor, Missing Seattle Purple Norseman, Rick Cox, Sean O'Keefe, Stephen Reynolds, Strelnikov, and Todd Walser, who are the people that YouTube says is in the chat already. So let me do before I forget all this again, post all the social media things. So I'm not sure what's up with that. We're definitely public. I don't see a problem with the stream. So I'm going to assume that the stream is okay. Everything looks fine. So I'm not sure what's going on. It could be YouTube just sucks again today. So anyway. Channel of the week. Before I forgot to have the notes ready for this show. So channel of the week is Grantos, I think. Yes, it is Grantos. There is a link to Grantos' channel. He is doing some really nice stuff that I have enjoyed watching, so please check that out. And I'm happy to report that the other channels of the week that I picked in previous weeks are doing very well as well, so check all those out as well. So, as you're possibly aware, I did start a new job on Wednesday, so I'm still kind of getting my feet under me with that. I don't want to go into it in too much detail, but everything went reasonably smoothly, and I have no particular things to complain about. I mean, there's some weird things about this particular position, like the pay schedule is monthly. That's goofy. But, you know, I can deal with it. Just have to, you know, as long as I know it's monthly and it's not a surprise, I can plan around that. So NATO, nukes, and Nazis is more on alternate history stuff. And I know that people argue about this, and I don't want to talk about exclusively this kind of topic. But I mean, I would consider NATO, nukes, and Nazis and, say, Red Sun, Black Cross, and, for that matter, Objective Moscow, and all of that 1980s Cold War gone hot stuff as, at this point, alternate history titles. I'm making no qualitative statements about that whatsoever. If you're into that, you're into that. That's cool. I personally am not super into that. I have a couple of those games, and I feel like I have enough. I do feel like the current near-future hypothetical stuff is, I think, a more fertile area than I think not very many publishers are, or designers, I suppose, since the publishers are publishing stuff that designers want to design, right? By the way, we are drinking. I may be trying to finish this, not tonight, because it's pretty high-octane stuff. This is a Gordon MacPhail independent bottling of Kalila. It is quite young. And it has been sitting around for a while, so I figure it might be time to finish it off. And I have noticed that my new bottle of Kalila, that's only a couple of months old, is almost empty. So, some of you may recall, but that Kalila is in fact my favorite Scotch, or at least my favorite Scotch that I can actually get. So, now, of course, there are, you know, we all probably, at least nominally, want to see coverage of topics that we haven't seen in the past. The classic, hilarious example is the War of Jenkins' Ear, which there's been at least one game about. S&T did a game on it at one point, and it is, after all, part of the War of the Austrian Succession. And there's a few games on the War of the Austrian Succession. So, for a goofball topic with a goofball name, it, you know, something like 20 or 30,000 casualties in it, so that's not nothing. Let's see, trying to keep these organized by nationality, and unfortunately, because all the counters exploded out of the sheets, it's just a giant. I have a giant pile of unclipped counters in this box, so we're doing our best to keep it organized. I know that there's a lot of ancient topics, particularly, that there's been little or no treatment of. And I'm not necessarily talking about battles, because let's face it, you know, how many different treatments of Granicus do we need, right? Or Gargamella or something like that. And Gargamella is a terrible example. It's one of the best known battles of the ancient world, and there have been multiple games on Gargamella. But even picking an obscure ancient tactical level game, chances are pretty good there's been at least a couple treatments of it. But there's a lot of like little wars, like so there's no just game on the Pyrrhic Wars, for example, or and there's not many on a lot of those Roman wars. I mean, there's several Punic War games, on almost invariably on the Second Punic War, which is the best known one because it's the one with Hannibal and Scipio and the elephants crossing the Alps and all that stuff. It's the one we know the best. And there's at least, but I think there's one game that I can think of about the First Punic War, and that is the Richard Berg Carthage, the First Punic War, which is an operational game. Now, there's also scenarios, I think, for all three Punic Wars in Imperium Romanum. So let's see here. Jeff Beeler mentions, hi Jeff, that they rebooted NATO Nukes and Nazis. Yeah, there's at least one near future hypothetical that I'm aware of about a possible coming war between China and Japan. That's When Dragons Fight, I think. That was in, I think, Modern War magazine. Now, some topics, of course, are going to lend themselves more to certain levels of simulation than others, right? So the Mongol invasions that John Longshore mentions, right? I mean, how do you handle that? I mean, there is a game that I can think of, the Devil's Horseman, that deals with some of the tactical battles of that period. But I am aware of no game that handles that on the strategic or operational level. Is that, and I don't know, that is not a topic I am particularly well informed about. Is that because it is not interesting at that level? Maybe. I legitimately do not know. Let's see here. I mean, for a long time, we saw. I could think of exactly one game about the Little Bighorn, for example. I had a bitch of a time extracting the Korean War counters from the sheets. Now, I typically do, to revisit that topic, we recall from a couple weeks ago that I was punching that. And the counter, I ended up using nail clippers because the counters are so thick they didn't fit in my clipper. I had to strain to extract them from the counter sheets. I'm not a big, cut them out of the counter sheets type guy. That is not something I normally do. I do occasionally, particularly if they're counters with center nibs, like everything that Spitzer did. It has center nibs, as far as I know. Some of the older Decision stuff, not that old either, has center nibs. Their version of Empires of the Middle Ages, which I picked up not that long ago, I'm distressed to notice has center nibs. A lot of Avalon Hill stuff had center nibs too, but it depends on what period we're talking about. So, French and Indian War, it's funny you should mention that, because there are several games on that, including the brand new Bayonets and Tomahawks that is getting a decent amount of positive buzz. I don't recall who the designer on that is, to be honest. That is not one that I ordered. What is on its way here? I don't know. I have something coming from GMT, but I don't know what it is. It is a package from GMT. It might be the 1914 counter sheet, which I did order and which is shipping nowish. When I say Spitzer, I mean SPI TSR. Those games released by TSR under SPI as a brand. I don't have many of those, but I do have a few. I have the ETO, the deluxe ETO and PTO, which actually looks like pretty good they look like pretty good games. I had them back in the day and thought enough of them that I reacquired them. They're not, although you might see stupid people doing stupid stuff on eBay, they're not especially valuable. There's an advanced ETO and advanced PTO from Decision, which are fairly expensive and very bloated. So, caveat emptor on that, which we'll get back to that too. What do I have? I have Wellington's Victory. I have Battle Over Britain. I would kind of like to have their version of Le Grand Armée, which is a different game than the SPI Le Grand Armée. I have, so that 1914 game, Just a Guard, who I pointed you to channel-wise a couple weeks ago, just did a video today on the new 1914 Galicia game. That is a recent Paper Wars magazine game from Mike Resch. Looks busted from his video. He did not use the term busted, but I'll use it. Based on his analysis of it, I'm assuming he's being accurate. It appears to be flatly busted. But I have the other three early World War I games from Mike Resch, all of which are far more detailed than that magazine game. And they look pretty interesting. And that's the 1914 series that new counter sheet from GMT is intended to support. So, okay. Scourge of God, that's a good point. Yeah, I forgot about that one. Doug Sunset mentions that, and this is a good point, the French and Indian War is a term that you really only, I think, probably hear here in North America. It was, in many respects, just the part of the 7 Years' War that occurred in North America. And in fact, there is an old S&T game from, I think, Decision, called the 7 Years' World War, or something like that, that actually treats the 7 Years' War as a world war. It actually looks kind of interesting. Well, it's topically looks interesting anyway. I mean, the game does not actually look that good at a glance. So I, might be mistaken. Be happy to be wrong. So when we say Asian topics, this is actually an interesting point. Somebody, was it Joe Miranda or Ty Bomb or somebody like that, is doing an SPI, an S&T quarterly on the Chinese Civil War. Okay. Now, the Chinese Civil War is, first of all, a bigger topic than the Second Sino-Japanese War, which is the part of World War II between China and Japan that happens in China, right? That's the part that starts in 1937 and runs till 1945. But then the Chinese Civil War starts earlier than that and runs later than that till 1949 or so. I have an idea of what the literature. I'm not an expert on this topic, so that's out in the open. But I have an idea of what the literature looks like on this topic because I did take a class on modern China about 7 years ago, and the pickings in English. I mean, if you read Chinese, then the world's your oyster. But the pickings in English on this are really, really slim. There are a couple books. There's a book called Forgotten Ally. I think it's called Forgotten Ally. That is about the Second Sino-Japanese War, and I have it. It's a pretty good book. There's Barbara Tuchman. Yes, that Barbara Tuchman's Stillwell in the American Experience in China, but that's really dated. Has, I think, a pretty stilted view of Stillwell in particular, and because it's a stilted view of Stillwell, it means you're also getting a stilted view of Chang, which is, I think, neither view holds up in modern scholarship. Let me put it that way. So I would encourage people to find more up-to-date sources. And things that I just listed are almost all I know. There's quite a bit more on the Russian Revolution or Russian Civil War in English. Just that I'm able to find a dozen books or so relatively easily on the Russian Civil War. I can find about 2 in English on the Chinese Civil War. The Russian Civil War is interesting, actually, because while there's not like one game on it, there's actually only about 6 or 8 games on it or something like that. There is a few others that are either super abstract or are card games or deal with some specific engagement on a tactical or semi-tactical level in the Russian Civil War. But at this point, with the possible exception of Red Russia, which I might have gotten rid of. I think I have, and also the exception of the revised Russian Civil War, which appeared in S&T and which is a new version of the Dunnigan SPI Russian Civil War with a couple of extra ding-dongs added to it. I actually have every game on the every war game on the Russian Civil War that I am aware of. There's actually at least one downloadable game as well, which I have downloaded, so I guess I have it. But I haven't tried to play it, so. It is. So the Dunnigan Russian Civil War is a really, really interesting and novel design. And it's one of those really interesting and novel Dunnigan designs that actually might hold up today. Unlike some of those efforts, which sometimes they don't. A lot of Asian topics, almost all African topics, except from maybe some things in the colonial period, are simply don't have game treatments. There's a whole bunch of. I mean, there's little better coverage of like Japan, for example, because you've got games like Sekigahara, even Shogun, which is the Milton Bradley Shogun, which is released as. I forget what the title is now, but it was originally called Shogun, and then it was called Samurai Swords because I guess they got into trouble with the James Clavell people. And I could swear there is a. I'm going to revisit the chat in a minute here. I could swear there is a game about Simon Bolivar in this Revolutions in South America. But I think only one. Okay. Alright, so, Boxer Rebellion, there's a game or two on that, but there's not much. And that's a weird, I mean, I don't want to say weird, but that's a tough topic. How do you handle that? I mean, it's a game, is it, like, super unbalanced? Because, I would think so. Taiping Rebellion is another one, actually, that is actually quite interesting historically. And there might be a game on the Taiping Rebellion that I'm aware of. Also, don't forget, there is actually a significant wargaming hobby in places like Japan and Hong Kong. So it is entirely plausible that that East Asian topics, particularly East Asian topics that relate to China or Japan, in fact have games on them that I just don't know about. That's very plausible. There's a lot of games on the 7 Years' War, to get that out. There are a number of like strategic or strategio-operational level games. There's piles and piles of games about the tactical battles. There's not many games about the 30 Years' War at the strategic level. There's a couple, but there's a lot of battles in the 30 Years' War too, and a lot of those have seen treatments. Jeff Beeler mentions... So, John Clark, first of all, thank you for coming by. Gallipoli is a little bit under... I mean, almost any World War I game is going to have... That's like a strategic level World War I game is going to have some kind of mechanism to include a Gallipoli-like move. But, like, in terms of handling the topic in depth, off the top of my head, the only one I can think of is the Gallipoli 1915 game, relatively recent, last couple of years game, from GMT. I am not sure how fun that would be to play. It looks... Actually, I like the way it looks. It looks good. And it's a pretty big game in a 2-inch box. But I'm not sure how it would handle. I don't know, how much of that campaign... Because obviously they got bogged down. They did do some moving at first, and then they got bogged down where they stayed for some time. And there's a movie on that topic if you don't know, early Mel Gibson film. And the Australians are still upset about it, by the way. But let's see here. A lot of markers here. Plains of Abraham. Jim, thanks for stopping by. Queenston Heights and Plains of Abraham. The only game I'm aware of, Plains of Abraham, which I think occurs actually in Canada and not in somewhere in the Middle East, is the scenario from Table Battles, actually. Operational Aztec Wars of Conquest. That would be neat. The difficulty with that gets to be that there's not really written documentation on the period, and that really hurts when doing the historical research. So a lot of the research that you do ends up being archaeological research, which is not typically super fertile for war games, right? Even if you go back to like I don't know about Sumerian, but like to Babylonian stuff. I mean, some of that stuff got written down, and some of that stuff, even if it was 1,000 years later, it's still 3,000 years before us. So you have some ancient sources where you are not going to have those for Mesoamerican topics. I guess with the exclusion of the Mayans, but I don't know that they really wrote much in the way of history down, or at least not that survived. I do know that a lot of Mesoamerican writing was destroyed by missionaries and the like during the colonial periods. So Stephen Reynolds mentions new coin game not yet published on the Chinese Civil War. Yes, it is called China's War, and I think it's a Brian Train design. I have a lot of faith in Brian Train, which is good because I'm a little bit leery of applying the coin formula quite that literally to that topic. In that, I think there is a generic warlords faction, and I'm not sure that makes sense. There are also, coin games that have some number other than 4 factions. But I believe it is a 4-faction game. Mark Felton's channel, YouTube channel, is very good too. I think he's got a couple of different YouTube channels. John Longshore says Stillwell was a boob. Barbara Tuckman did not really agree with that. I think recent analysis of Stillwell largely agrees with you. There is a reason he got sacked, and it is not because Madam Chang complained about him, right? He was hated by the American military establishment, too. He got along with absolutely nobody. Vietnam versus Cambodia. Boy. So even now, researching even the Vietnam War, the part the U.S. was in, is not super easy, right? It's a sensitive topic, and there's not as much material. I mean, there's a lot more material now than there was 30 years ago, but there's not as many sources on that topic as you really want. On the other hand, you want to do a game on the Battle of the Bulge. You've got so much source material you don't know what to do with, right? It's a matter of picking the best source material from a huge field, as opposed to being stuck with a source because it's all you got. Portuguese Civil War is actually a really interesting idea from Hethwell. Hethwell, you're in Portugal. You should design that game. You have homework now. Get to work. A Russo-Swedish War. There's at least one game on that I can think of. Is that the Great Northern War, or is that a different Russo-Swedish War? Because I think there's games on both. Balkan Wars pre-World War I is another one. I have not seen anything on that. Again, we're 300 issues deep into the history of strategy and tactics, so it is plausible that something has popped up, but I don't recall it. Doug Sunset mentions mid-18th century war between the UK and France and India. That's good call. Mid-18th century. So that kind of is covered by the imperial struggle period. But you're not really, you're obviously not getting much detail out of imperial struggle. Which sounds weird to say because it's not a super simple game, but there's not a lot of detail in it either. Mike Anthony says Brian Train's China War only goes up to 1941. I thought it went up to 1945. I might be wrong. I am less interested in it if it only goes up to 1941. I gotta tell you, the Sino-Japanese, again, second to be precise about it, the second Sino-Japanese War, 1937 and 1945, is a topic of considerable interest to me. It is, and I've talked about before. It is not a topic that there have been very many games on. There have been a couple of tactical, or more or less tactical treatments of specific battles or something like that. But as far as covering the whole thing, there's a magazine game or two, or a game or two at the magazine games type of scale where it's, one or two counter sheets and one map. And then there's two big games on the subject. One of which is War of the Suns, which is, I believe, still currently available for an MMP. I have that. I haven't tried to play it yet. And it's got a bit of a bad reputation, but it's also got a revised rulebook. And the only alternative to a big game on that big subject is, unfortunately, War of Resistance, which is I forget what it was called, but that is the Pacific version of Europa. And I have discussed it a little bit with our local Europa guru, and I am reasonably certain it sounds astonishingly unfun to play, whereas War of the Suns at least has a shot. So, Vietnam, the subject of Vietnam before the U.S.'s involvement is a great point, actually. There's the Kim, I think it's a Kim Kanger design Dien Bien Phu game from, I think, Legion, I think. There's Tonkin. There's a few of those. Not a lot of treatment of that part of the greater Indochina War. All right, trying to catch up with the chat. And I'm super backed up, so bear with me here. S&T Taiping Rebellion, I'll have to look at that. That's a super interesting topic. British India. Unfortunately, I'm not sure what we mean by British India. I suspect that John Company is probably going to be the definitive game on the topic of British India. Without being more specific about that topic. And there's a new edition of that coming at some point soonish. Hexasim's Tenka Toitsu, which, don't hold me to that pronunciation. I have seen that. It is and it is from Hexasim. Like most Hexasim games, I don't know anything about the topic. I don't know anything about it plays. It is a gorgeous game. Strategic 30 Years War game, Ken 10, as the case may be. There is a 30 Years War game, or is that 100 Years War? I think it's 30 Years War. There's one from GMT from years ago, and there's one, I thought there was one from One Small Step. I could be wrong about that. It might have been 100 Years War. Mexican War is another one. That we don't see much on. There's Halls of Montezuma, which is from GMT, which is, shall we say, not one of GMT's better regarded titles. And there's Gringo at the tactical level to handle a bunch of those tactical engagements. And I have Gringo. I haven't played any of them. But Gringo looks interesting. And if you're interested, a lot of those individuals who later became very famous as participants in the U.S. Civil War made their military reputations in the Mexican War, including, what's his name, the big guy. All right, Maori Wars for Legion. Jason Peterson mentions this. I didn't know that was a John Paniski game. I also don't really know anything about that, but that is also an exceptionally attractive game. One of the best-looking wargame maps I've ever seen. Definitely top 10. Kaiser Bill asks, there are many interesting topics being suggested, but what publisher would do a game on these? I'll tell you, Compass. Compass is super, whatever else you got to say about them, Compass is super receptive to designer pitches for games. Now, assuming the pitch isn't crap, right? That's why, and I'm sure I'm not the only person to notice. There's tons of World War I games out from Compass. There's tons of several on the War of 1812. The reason for that is that's what designers pitched to them. So it is true, and I know Bill is on the lookout for underhandled historical topics too. So I think that if there's a bottleneck on doing games on obscure topics, I think it's designer desire to do games on those topics rather than necessarily publisher wherewithal to do games on obscure topics. So, all right. Todd Walser asked about the Battle of Hastings. I want to say there's at least one game on the Battle of Hastings. Actually, I think Stamford Bridge is just as interesting, if not more. So the way that works is Edward the Confessor dies. He was at one point exiled and resident in France, and William the Bastard of Normandy claimed, with no documentary evidence that I'm aware of whatsoever, that Edward had promised him that he was going to be his heir. Well, the barons of England saw it differently and nominated Edmund Ironsides to be, Harold Godwinson, not Edmund Ironsides, Harold Godwinson to be the next king. At the same time, Harold Hardrada, King of Norway and one of the last great Viking kings, this is all in 1066. Decides he wants to be the king of England, sets sail for England with a big fleet and huge army, lands. Harold Godwinson marches his ass off to meet Harold Hardrada at Stamford Bridge, defeats him, and then marches his ass off again to meet William the Conqueror, or William the Bastard at the time, who has just landed at the Battle of Hastings. And then he takes an arrow in the face, or something like that. And that's the end of that. And William then becomes William the Conqueror and sets England up for several centuries of Norman rule. So that is the thumbnail history of that particular eventful year. Wallenstein. Yeah, that's actually it does sound like more of a Euro, but actually that looks like a pretty interesting game. Men of Iron is medieval. So there's games about in the Men of Iron series, which I like quite a bit actually. The new I don't know, but recent-ish Men of Iron Tri-Pack is another one of those dynamite value packages from GMT. Highly recommended by me. Also quite easy to play, by the way, if you're like intimidated by Great Battles of History. Men of Iron is basically a simplified version of that. More simplified than, say, Simple Great Battles of History actually is. And so the first one is, I think, a variety of battles in the 100 Years' War. And then the second one is Infidel, which is Crusades battles, which includes some of the notable ones. The third one is, I forget what it's called, but it's War of the Roses. And then the fourth one, which is the one that's not in the tri-pack, is Arquebus, which is the Italian Wars. Haven't played the Arquebus stuff yet, but I've played stuff from the other three, and I have enjoyed them quite thoroughly. Grumpy Gamer says he likes the Gallipoli game. That's awesome. So there's a new game using that system, that Mons 1915, I think it is, game coming. So I am reasonable. Jeff, wait a minute. Let me catch up to that. Kilroy was here, says he needs Stigler to find him a copy of Gringo. I hope Alan can, because I think it's incredibly unlikely that Gringo will ever be reprinted. And it is not cheap on the secondary market. None of those games are cheap on the secondary market. Except, of course, those ones that are in print. Sean O'Keefe says the Aussies are okay with Gallipoli at this point. It's now seen as a defining moment in their and in New Zealand's modern identities. That makes complete sense. I don't know if they're actually sore about it still, but it's, it was considered a defining national event for Australia and New Zealand. City-state warfare in the Fertile Crescent. So, I haven't really looked at this yet. And nor have I edited the video, so don't quote me on any of this. It looks like this week's unboxing is going to be Cradle of Civilization from Compass. Okay, so there's 2 games in that. The interesting thing about the 2 games, because I was saying to myself as I was unboxing it, why didn't they just ship this as 2 games? Well, the reason is they're on the same map. And one of those games, From Sumeria to Persia, I think it's called, looks pretty interesting and looks like a history of the world type of thing. Not really a city-state warfare, but at least it'll give you some sense of that. Of course, there's also Civilization, and there's a whole genre of computer games that are basically Civ and Civ knockoffs. So I don't feel like folks interested in ancient city-state development games are particularly hurting for games. Revolution Games has a game about Hastings. That's true. I remember that now that you've mentioned it. Hastings is not in Men of Iron. That is correct. The Men of Iron battles are all after that. Like by 100 years or 2 after that, actually. None of them are as early as 1066. S&T, was that S&T or was that part of Prestog's Master Pack? The S&T Hastings game. Because it might have been part of Prestog's. Worthington did a game on the Battle of Quebec. Not Compass. Columbia Games. Back when they were not even Columbia Games yet, did a game about Quebec. Quebec 1859 or 1759 or whatever that is. That's the game that got them started as a wargame publisher, and Gilbert Collins has at least 1 video on that. First Battle of El Alamein from July 1942 is an overlooked topic. Well, maybe it might be as a battle game, but at the same time, there's a lot of games that cover that period in North Africa that at least allow you to handle it at a somewhat higher level. The Nomonon War from Stigler. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not. I've heard of it. I essentially know nothing about it. So, Matt Taylor says the Siege of Fort Wayne has been overlooked. I'll take your word for that. Pax Baltica from GMT. That's true. I've had several opportunities to pick that up, actually, and have not taken advantage of it. We will fix this currently clipping thing after the stream, because it is busted. You may not see that it's busted, but it's annoying me. Stigler says World at War is pitching a Thai Bomba all-out Japan versus the Soviets in Manchuria. Okay, World at War magazine? I don't have a particular problem with Thai Bomba as a designer, but I will say that Thai Bomba tends to pick a lot of subjects that do not interest me. So I appear to not have much interest overlap with Thai Bomba, and therefore I may have a game or 2 from him, but I don't have very much. I can tell you that. Jeff Morchiori, Thunder Upon the Land, Northern War by ATO, which I assume you mean Against the Odds. That's interesting. Haven't seen that. Vicksburg there are a couple games on Vicksburg. I keep scrolling down by like 1 notch and it shoots down like 25 notches and it's annoying me. So bear with me while I fix this again. Okay, so Vicksburg. Vicksburg is a civil... so when we talk about what wargame topics are popular, One of the things that we immediately home in on is World War II, right? There's probably as many World War II games released every year as there are war games on every other topic put together. I don't know if that's true. I haven't done an analysis of that number, but off the top of my head, I'm probably not radically off in that statement. Nevertheless, there are a fair number of American Civil War games released on an annual basis, and yet there's not very many games about Vicksburg. Part of the problem there is that so many American Civil War games are battle games. They are games at some kind of tactical level, okay? And Vicksburg is not interesting at that level. It was a siege, and there's a larger campaign of maneuver happening there too. That is potentially interesting, and that I think Great Campaigns of the American Civil War will handle extremely well. But as a battle game, I can see why people do not take a shine to Vicksburg particularly. That does make sense to me. We are going to have to stop any second now and start putting counters in bags. So that's the deal on Vicksburg. There are nevertheless a couple of games. There's Mississippi Fortress. It's part of the Civil War campaign series from Clash of Arms. I forget who the designer is, but there are vassal modules for them. Judd Vance is a big supporter of that series. It is a massive amount of hidden information type of game, and unplayable solitaire, like complete garbage solitaire. Nevertheless, it's an interesting looking game. I got rid of the two games in that series that I had just because I felt like I was being sufficiently served by Great Campaigns of the American Civil War for Civil War stuff at that level. And it gives me a lot more material than the Civil War campaign series did. Stephen Reynolds, The Mouse That Roared. I apologize if I'm catching up from 20 comments made 20 minutes ago. I'm trying to catch up here. What is that about? Messing Up Rules mentions the period in Europe between World War I and World War II. There's actually a fair number of games on that deal with that. In at least I don't know about many, but in a lot of cases, those are games that are designed to tie into other games, right? Like your Days of Decision and your what's the other one? Gathering Storm and Storm over Asia, for instance. All of which tie into and Origins of World War II, which is an Avalon Hill game, but a Dunnigan design. And another one of those games, by the way, that I have a hunch. I mean, I picked that. I never saw that game. I mean, I knew of it, but I never examined it or anything like that. I found a copy for like $2 or $3 at Goodwill a couple of years ago, and looking at it, and I haven't tried to play it, so I could be nuts. That game looks like it was like 20 or 30 years ahead of its time, actually. There's some seriously interesting things going on in Origins of the Second World War. I am not convinced that it's fun to play. That may well not be the case, but there's some really interesting things going on there. Thomas Wallace mentions USSR versus Poland 1920. There's at least one game on that. Well, I mean, the one I can think of is Red Eagle Defiant. That's not what it's called. It's an old GDW game, recently redone by Compass. White Eagle, Red Eagle. Somebody will mention it in the chat, but it's a game about the Russo-Polish War of 1920. Okay, so Strike of the Eagle. That's true. That's tactical, though, as well. Thank you, Carl. I mean, I'm not really in the loop on this. I'm in the Discord server, actually, but I'm in 100 million Discord servers, so it's hard to keep track of exactly what development is occurring in the world of coin development right now. There's a lot occurring in the world of coin development right now, and as has been the case for several years. Red Star White Eagle, that is, Grumpy Gamer, thank you. That is, in fact, the game I was talking about. I think you probably typed that before I even asked, what's that thing called? Legion developing a 3-player 1066 game. That sounds awesome, actually, and I would love to see that. That I think would make a very good 3-player game. You could... I don't know how long that game would be, but I think you could get a quite good 3-player game out of it. ID Jester, Men of Iron. I don't think I picked Men of Iron, actually. I did pick one of the GBOH games, which I think was SPQR, just because of the value in the box. I mean, was the primary number. I do know that a bunch of people did pick Men of Iron, the tri-pack, in that quiz because of that, because there's so much value in the box. And that was my general philosophy of how I picked what I picked. For ID Jester's video he did a couple weeks ago now on, like, more or less desert island games that you would 10 games that you would take if you that was going to be all the 10 games you all had the rest of your life. The Williamite Wars in Ireland. That's a good point. I am aware of no games on that subject. Jacobite Rebellion, actually, there's not that much on those battles on, or the Jacobite Rebellion. I believe Bonnie Prince Charlie to be rolling in his grave because he is being underrepresented in wargaming. S&T game has a magazine game on the Balkan Wars. That sounds right. John Longshore mentioned Sino-NATO game on the Space War in conjunction with World War II. I was about to say, I thought you were saying World War III. I was about to recommend Stellar Horizons for that, actually. Romans versus Parthians, the Parthian Wars. Now, some of the tactical battles in the Parthian, with the Parthians, have seen action in things like Great Battles of History. But generally speaking, we haven't. I really wanted to see Richard Berg do a whole big line of games in that Ancient World series that dealt with a bunch of ancient Greek stuff and things like the Parthian Wars and the Pyrrhic Wars and the Civil Wars and all that stuff. And we only ever got to 2, which I like the 2 a lot. And I do hope Mark Herman and Alan Ray come out with the long-awaited Thunderbolt, which is the second Punic War. And I actually kind of hope that volume will contain and update the old ones as well, which would be nice, which would seriously undermine the value of my mint They're not mint. They've both been played. But I don't mind that. I'd rather see them in print. I think they're good games. 17th century is not my period either. Russo-Turkish War. There's at least one S&T game on that. Italian-Ottoman Wars. Yep, as Alan Salazar points out, both have seen treatment in S&T. Vimy Ridge is at least one game about that. I don't think I'm thinking of the the Decision Folio, but I could be. It's not a popular enough topic for me to recall exactly, frankly. Mike Anthony, Lou Pulsar did a Hastings card game from Worthington. I'm sure I didn't know that. I'm unaware of anything that Lou has designed that's not Britannia. So I do know he has a YouTube channel, so check that out if you're interested. Jeff Beeler mentions the new Coin Mars Independence War game. So that looks... I'm a huge fan of The Expanse, both the books and the show. Well, I really love the show. But I've read the books up to past the point where the show is at right now. That... what's it called? Red Dust Rebellion. I think it's a really interesting thing for Coin because it allows whoever's designing it to say, here is the Coin paradigm. I am going to design a situation to fit the paradigm rather than trying to shoehorn the Coin paradigm into this historical topic where it might not necessarily fit, which I think has happened a couple of times with Coin. Not necessarily the same ones that some people think, but I do think that has happened a couple of times with Coin. So, and Red Dust Rebellion looks a lot like a Expanse with the serial numbers fouled off, but like rebellions on Mars have been a sci-fi thing for eons. Okay, I mean not S&T, but SPI did that back in the day, and that was a huge plot element in Babylon 5, which was 30 years ago now, or whatever it was. It's a long time. I'm very old. Okay, Strelnikov, game on the Geneva Convention would work out of Congress of Vienna. That's actually a very interesting point, because we have just started to see now to what extent these games are war games is a topic that I do not intend to address this evening. But a game like Churchill or Pericles, although I don't have a good grasp of Pericles, but I would definitely put something like Versailles 1919 or the upcoming Congress of Vienna, from what I understand of it, where it's kind of a war game, but it's a game about a peace conference rather than, although in the case of Churchill, they're really war conferences and not peace conferences, you know what I'm saying? I like Churchill quite a lot, actually. Even though a lot of people balk at the victory conditions because it is possible to do too well and therefore lose. Some people don't like that. I don't object to that, and I think the game works regardless of whether you like that or not. So I agree Gilbert Collins is awesome. I love Gilbert's channel. I am very much looking forward to his game War for America that is coming out from Compass. So we're not going to talk about decision games and them being terrible today. Against the Odds has done some obscure topics. It's done some pretty bog standard topics too. But one of the advantages of magazine games is that you can cover a lot of topics because you can put out a lot of issues. Vincent Stella mentions Gorizia 1916 on the 6th Battle of the Isonzo River. I forget how many battles of the Isonzo River there were, but there was a bunch. By possibly the best named company in the history of wargame publication, Europa Simulazioni. They're an Italian publisher, and I love that name. That is a fantastic name. I know nothing about their Gorizia game, but that is a fantastic publisher name. World War I, remember that World War I was, for a long time, a topic that neither designers nor players really wanted to see much of because it was perceived as boring. For reasons, right? There are reasons for that. But one of the reasons for that is, unfortunately, the fact that the Guns of August is kind of a shitty game. And I own Guns of August. I played Guns of August back in the day. I think it's an interesting game, and I'm not getting rid of my copy, but it's not a very good game in terms of fun. It's not a fun game to play. And that sort of exceptionally tedious grinding steered a lot of people away from World War I topics for a long time. I do believe that the game that proved that idea wrong was Paths of Glory, which gets a very engaging game out of World War I. And of course, we all know about the Western Front being an incredibly static situation for a good chunk of the war. Not the whole thing. The first 3 months or so were quite mobile. But after that, it did bog down. And the whole front between Austria-Hungary and Italy, they fought like 9 battles over the Isonzo River, right? So it was a lot of just back and forth and millstones grinding against one another. It was not considered a particularly interesting topic. On that topic, the only game I have is the Italian Front game from SPW. That is part of their Weltkrieg series. I want to say I have actually punched that. And you look at the terrain and you understand why they had trouble making offensive progress, right? It's the terrain is garbage. So, the fields of Flanders, at least they had to dig in there to make offensive movement extremely difficult. On the Italian border, the terrain did that for them. Jeff Beeler asks about Mark Herman's John Carter Warlord of Mars. It's funny, I actually just saw some pictures of that being played on a table by Igor Luknev over in Moscow. It is. I had that game back in the day, very briefly. I got rid of it. I was a huge fan of the Edgar Rice Burroughs books as a teen. I would have gleefully murdered a whole bunch of people for a John Carter RPG, which I was hoping I was getting sort of a John Carter RPG from S&T, from SPI in that game, and that's not what it was. Nevertheless, it's a game. It is a Mark Herman game, and I'd really kind of like to see it again, because there's some interesting things going on there. Nowadays, we actually do have a licensed John Carter game currently available. It is from Modifius. I do own it. It is very nice. I even bought the dice, because one of the irritating things about Modifius's system is that you can play it with regular D6s, but it sucks. You have to remember, okay, so everything is worth 1, except for a 5 is worth 2, and a 6 is worth 3, or something like that. Just, you want to buy the specialty dice, and I actually, even though I don't like that, I did buy the specialty dice for that. So I bought a couple sets, which were on sale on Amazon. Anyway, if you're a big fan of the Edgar Rice Burroughs Barsoom stuff, I do recommend checking that product line out. The books are gorgeous, and the system is a sort of stripped-down 2D20. That's their house, Modifius's house system, which I do like for the Conan and Star Trek games in their sort of more robust versions. I have had a glance at the new Dune game, and it was not an impressed glance but that's a preliminary opinion. Alan Salazar mentions the White War between... Oh, it did it to me again. Hold on. It keeps shooting me all the way to the bottom. Okay, here we go. Okay. There is an Expanse board game. It's by Jeff Engelstein, who is the co-designer of Versailles 1919. I have watched some video on it, and I like Versailles 1919 a lot. I am reasonably sure I would not like the Expanse board game. Fred Serval's game, The Guest of Robin Hood. Not historical. It's also not out. And there's a lot of games on Robin Hood. I mean, I don't think we can count that. I think Fred's game looks interesting, but there's a lot of games on Robin Hood. Stephen Reynolds says Pax Baltica is okay. I have a blister on this finger, so that's if I'm cringing, that's why. It's not from the clipper. Carl Creeder seems to have a complete collection of Europa Simulazioni. John Launcher says he has nothing against Ty Bomba other than his choice of barbers. I am not commenting on that. Somebody else mentions down here that there are actually a lot of games on the Mexican War at some level, right? Some of them are like Battle of Chapultepec type things. There are a decent number of games about the Mexican War. There's not a lot of games about the whole Mexican War. Most of the ones I'm aware of are, in fact, more on the tactical side. Jeff Beeler clarifies that he's talking about a Joe Miranda proposal, the Khalkhin Gol campaign of 1939. Operational level game of the battle between the Japanese Empire and the Soviet Union in 1939. Okay. That is an interesting topic, actually, and I wouldn't mind seeing a game about that. I think there's been a couple, but it's definitely not a game that's getting bulge-level coverage. Siege of Jerusalem? That's a great point. Is there another game about the Siege of Jerusalem? I don't think so. It is, to my knowledge, the only... Although there's going to be a second one sometime soonish, because Multiman's got a Area Impulse game coming called Storm Over Jerusalem that's going to deal with that same topic. And Siege of Jerusalem is coming back, I think, from Compass. Jeff Beeler mentions that Richard Berg was good for doing games on unusual topics like the Taiping Rebellion. That's absolutely true. I've heard people say that Richard Berg never did World War II games, which is obvious nonsense. I mean, starting with off the top of my head, he did June 6th, which is June 7th now, from GMT, a World War II game. He did the infamous campaign for North Africa, and he did Desert Fox, which is, to many, still the definitive game about that particular part of the North African campaign. So Richard Berg did a few World War II games, but he was well known for doing games on topics that nobody else had touched. Thomas Wallace would like to see a modern China versus India game. Yeah, we really don't have that in Next War India-Pakistan. We have a next, India-Pakistan. And I think there's Chinese forces that can be committed to that, but that's not really what you're talking about. So, Greek Revolution in the 1820s, Greek Civil War in the 1940s. I don't know enough about those topics to say whether those would be interesting or not as war games, but they are probably interesting topics. Red Star White Eagle, we're back to... Patchwork Pictures, Xenophon's Anabasis, the March of the 10,000. That is a super interesting topic. I am not sure a war game is the right avenue for that. I think that would actually make a really great Euro game. For those who don't know, Xenophon is this Greek military leader who they're hired as mercenaries by some Persian faction. The Persian faction that they hired them gets defeated, so suddenly they're in the middle of the Persian Empire, and they have to march back home through hostile territory all the way back to Greece. And that book by Xenophon is the source for that story, and it's a cool ancient story. I think you could get a really good Euro game out of that. I don't know that it would necessarily be a good war game. Mike Anthony, Ancient Conquest 1 and 2. Are those from Excalibur? I want to say they are. Stephen Reynolds mentions Polish language games on Polish wars. I'm aware of at least 2 Polish war game publishers doing games in Polish that I am totally unqualified to make any comment about whatsoever. Mike Anthony mentions Campaigns of King David. I do remember that, but I've never looked at it other than seeing the box. And Assyrian Wars. Psalm 1918 by Nuts Publishing is... I think Nuts Publishing is still around, even though they abandoned the effort on Pacific War, which was going to be their number one thing, I think, just given the attention it's getting from GMT. Jeff Beeler mentions 2 games on the Battle of Buena Vista. DCB mentions that Eastern Europe gets short shrift. Siege of Vienna, well, there's more than one Siege of Vienna. The Battle of Grunwald, that's true. So everything to do with that Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, I'm aware of. Again, maybe the Poles have done some stuff on it, but I'm aware of 0 games on that subject. Jacobite Rebellion is another one of those things. It's kind of another arm in that same sort of imperial struggle type of thing. There is also there's an S&T game on the War of the Austrian Succession that I'm aware of. There's also which one is it? So there's No Peace Without Spain, which is the War of the Spanish Succession. There's a Pragmatic War, which is the Pragmatics named after the Pragmatic Sanction, which is the War of the Austrian Succession. And then there's No Peace Without Honor, which is coming, which is some wars of Louis XIV, the Sun King, and then there's also the 9 Years' War, which is I had to look up what the hell's the 9 Years' War, and it's the War of the League of Augsburg. Those are all point-to-point movement using the No Peace Without Spain system. 3 of the 4 are out from Compass, and the other one's coming. And that system is pretty well regarded. I have all of them. Thank you again, John. Once again, I have all 3 of the existing ones, and I really want to get to play those sometime before too much longer. Lilibolero, or the Battle of the Boyne, that's a good point. It's another against the odds thing. Todd also mentions the Pacific add-on to Origins of World War II. I actually have seen that. I think it's floating around somewhere online. Dawn of Empire. Which one is that? End of Empire is the one I'm thinking of. That's like that one that's like miscellaneous North American wars from like the French and Indian War and the American Revolution and some other stuff is all handled as part of that game. That is super interesting, actually. And I know the game's not that well regarded, but I would nevertheless have a really kind of like to look at that. Dawn of Empire, I can picture the box in my head, but I don't recall what it is about. Stigler says that Ancients puts him to sleep. I like Ancients a lot, actually. It's one of my, I mean, it's top 4 or 5 topics for me. Let me put it that way. I mean, I'm just like everybody else. I play more World War II stuff than anything else, but my number 1 topic in terms of interest is almost certainly American Civil War, followed by probably World War II, and then probably by Ancients. But bear in mind that there are huge gaps in the world of Ancients wargaming, meaning operational games. There are a few, but there's not very many. Whereas the operational games on World War II are a dime a dozen, right? There's I literally can't count them. There are so the Warring States period in China would actually, I think, be a fertile topic for a war game. There's computer games about that, but I'm unaware of board war games functioning in that space. There is a game called Dynasty from Hollenspiel. It's actually a Richard Berg design. Don't know that it's a war game particularly, but it's like a multiplayer game. It's like a 5-player game. It actually looks pretty interesting. I actually picked it up when Richard Berg passed away. I decided, I'm going to get that. Doug mentions that Battlefleet Mars was a very good game. That's one that I didn't play. I mean, I had the Star Force trilogy, so I played Star Force, Star Soldier, and Outreach. Of those 3, I think that Outreach is the one that holds up the best as a game. I think Star Force is potentially the most interesting, and I think Star Soldier doesn't really have anything good that I can say about it. I don't think it's interesting. I think if you are interested in that topic, you are probably better off getting a copy of Starship Troopers. Matt Taylor mentions game on the League of Nations. I mean, you have that modeled in Days of Decision, for example. Star Force was fully 3D as well, to the point of including trigonometry. Which is why I didn't necessarily think it was fun to play, but it was interesting. I mean, it really did extrapolate these science fictional ideas and turn that into a war game, and I thought that was interesting, but not necessarily that fun to play. Kyle Reese mentions strategic economic warfare. Well, virtually every strategic level World War II game has a huge economics component. That is a thing dating, I don't know about virtually every, but there's a lot that do. That's a thing that dates certainly from the original rise and decline of the Third Reich. It is super important in World in Flames. It is super important in Third Reich current incarnation of World at War. Other examples, not super important in something like War in Europe necessarily. But like the economic part of that is modeled with some level of detail in things like WIF and A World at War. A World at War as opposed to World at War. Stegler mentions about decision games again. So, I mean, somebody mentioned this in a comment on a recent video, and I am probably, in fact, not going to do the Let's All Bitch About Decision Games topic, because A, it's coming up anyway, and B, there's a lot to like in our hobby, and I don't see any exceptional value in dwelling on the crappy things. I have, given my opinion on decision games, which is basically caveat emptor. Just be aware of what you're buying when you buy a decision games game, that's all. I think some of them are excellent. I think a lot of them are not, but they're not the only publisher like that. So be careful, but you should be careful anyway. I mean, DMT's done some kind of rotten games too. So let's face it. And they're the biggest game in our hobby right now. Tony Mammal would like to see a war game based on the V show. They tried to resurrect that show with Marina Bakarin not too long ago. It's probably 10 years ago now. And it was pretty bad. I'm not really interested in like sci-fi man-to-man tactical topics. I gotta tell you. Thomas Wallace mentions, he says lights are going out in Europe. I think he's talking about the lamps are going out, which has a new version from Compass. That is a pretty well-regarded World War I game. And I will tell you also that the new version has a nice mounted map and is really nice looking. And is sitting upstairs. And there's an unboxing video, so check that out if you're interested in seeing the components of that. Another topic that we haven't seen much of are the Anglo-Dutch Wars, actually. Of which I think there were 3 or 4. And they were primarily economic in nature, but there were some engagements in them, too. We could get... I could see getting a war game out of that. Did it again. Jeff Baylor says Mark Herman's first game was John Carter Mars. Is that true? I didn't think so. I thought... so the next war is a Dunnigan design developed by Mark Herman. That may be the game I'm thinking of. October War, I want to say, was Mark Herman's first game, actually. I might be wrong. I'm willing to be corrected, as usual. 1917, I haven't seen. Carl, I hope that you enjoyed the Dune RPG. I have, like I said, I have a preliminary opinion. One of my things that there's hardly any pictures in it. I wanted pretty pictures. You know, the last Unicorn Games Dune RPG had a whole world wonderfully illustrated by artist Mark Zug. And regardless of whether anybody was ever able to get the friggin' thing or not, which was not the case, and it's kind of crippleware actually. It was a beautiful looking book. I spent hours on the phone with TSR trying to get a copy of that back in the day, and it did not occur. Anglo-Maratha Wars. The Player's Aid is in the house. Thanks for stopping by. Anglo-Maratha Wars. I don't know what that even means. Charles Latour is reading the Edgar Rice Burroughs Carson and Venus stuff. That's cool. I read some of the I read all the John Carter stuff, and I read some of the Tarzan stuff. A fair amount of the Tarzan stuff, actually. And I read a little bit of the At the Earth's Core stuff. Oh, more of these things, Jesus. Okay. And not any of the independent stuff from Edgar Rice Burroughs. One of the most important authors of the 20th century, though. This is not from clipping. It's because I have a wart right here, and the wart got zapped, and that's what the blister's from. Blood and Roses. Blood and Roses is the third Men of Iron game. Which is the one that covers the Wars of the Roses. Also, the Battle of Wakefield single scenario that popped up in C3I is technically attaches to Blood and Roses. It uses the same system as the other ones, but there's I'd like to see more games on the Crusades. Actually, that's another interest of mine. I have actually a lot of books on the Crusades, and there's not as many Crusades games as I would like there to be, but it's not like a super obscure topic either. I mean, you have Infidel, which covers tactical stuff. You have a variety of other tactical battle games that cover parts of that. And then you have Kingdom of Heaven from MMP, which is a very nice looking strategic level point-to-point thing. And you have Onward Christian Soldiers from Richard Berg and GMT, which I have played and which is very good, but it's a little weird because it's another one of those Berg things where it's like there's multiple scenarios and the multiple scenarios are really kind of different games, with completely different parameters. Like, this is a 2-player game, or this is a 6-player game. You know, this scenario is a 6-player game. So it's a little bit weird. And then, like, some games use the decks of cards, some scenarios use the decks of cards, and some scenarios don't. But nevertheless, I think there's a lot to like. I mean, it does have some of the Berg idiosyncrasies, like the nested event tables and stuff like that. But nevertheless, I think there's a lot to like in Onward Christian Soldiers. Grey Day mentions China's Warring States period. Kingmaker should be brought back. So I have owned Kingmaker in the past, don't have it anymore. And it's an interesting topic, right? It's War of the Roses, pretty much. But Kingmaker does not really simulate that. It's really kind of more of a that's a neat word, strategy game with a historical veneer. And I think it takes longer to play than it should. Like 2 to 4 times longer to play than it should. I think if you want that topic, if you're interested in that topic, you are probably better served by finding a copy of Crown of Roses from GMT and fighting your way with a machete through that rulebook. That is a difficult rulebook, but nevertheless, I think there's a lot of good game in Crown of Roses, and I think it's a better treatment of the topic than Kingmaker, frankly. Hollenspiel does have a Grunwald game. That is true. The Dragon and the Pearl. Who is the publisher of that? That's an interesting title. Britannia-like Chinese Imperial Rise and Fall game. Okay. I've never played Britannia, by the way. It could be delightful for all I know. But it's also not... I wouldn't call it a war game because it's another one of those things where it's kind of a neat look strategy game that doesn't really reflect a particular historical period. Stephen Reynolds, Compass's block game on the Jacobite Uprising is already out. It is called the Jacobite Uprising, I think, or Jacobite Rebellion. It is a Commands and Colors standalone game. I mean, if you look at it, it says it's Commands and Colors Tricorn, but it is standalone. You don't need the Commands and Colors Tricorn set to use that. And it looks good, actually. It's got a lot of battles in it. No box games covering the Mongols at the strategic level. I thought we covered that topic already. Scourge of God, maybe, something like that. Compass Games is doing Wolf Tones Rising, the 1798 Irish Rebellion. Okay, I'm not sure I've heard about that. The Haitian Revolution. Boy, that's a charged topic. Let me put it that way. I got to tell you, I have no desire to see a game on that subject. It was a super dirty war that I don't think is interesting at a simulation level. I think it would make not that you couldn't do a good game on the topic, but I think it would be super challenging to do a good game on that topic, and a good game on that topic would not be a war game. Cavalry and Indian Wars are not overly covered. Is it Legion War Games or Revolution Games? I think it's Legion that has a whole series on the Indian Wars. With there's a Little Bighorn game in that series, and a variety of Adobe Wells, I think, is covered. There's like 3 or 4 games in that series. Mike Anthony says wargamers that roleplay have a taste for ancients more than non-role players. That's plausible. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, you might be right. Well, I picked a good topic this time. So, Kaiser Bill, I picked a good topic this time, right? I picked a good topic that I could just blah, 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 read the chat. As opposed to, I have sometimes tried to be too focused on topic choices, and those turn out to be crappy topics for this format. Soviet-Afghan War. Yeah, there's not a lot of games on that I'm aware of. There's probably at least a couple. Dynasty simulates what Berg imagined were the forces at play between the emperor and provincial governors in China, but it had nothing much to do with the actual 5 dynasties period. Ken X says that, and I have no doubt that he is in fact correct. The game nevertheless looks neat. I don't know that it's necessarily a particularly historical game. There are a variety of Mafia games that I could think of, most of which are not war games, but are like card game type games. There was an old one from Mayfair that we played years ago and had a lot of fun with. I forget what it was called. Yeah, this keeps breaking on me, and it's super irritating. Balam's S asks about how about that current SPI license holder. Some of the SPI games don't reside with Decision Games. Actually, some of them reside with Excalibur games, or even a few still are with TSR, I believe. But I think those are just the RPGs. I think. Stigler likes lots of stuff that is called Great Battles of the American Civil War. And other stuff too, but you know, it's a. I do not begrudge him grinding this particular act because he's not completely wrong. Egg Ray Day says he assumes that the numerous Ancients games are generally focused on Western narratives due to language sources. It really depends on what Ancients we're talking about. If we're talking about like Roman stuff, not Romans versus Parthians, but like Romans versus Greeks, or Romans versus North Africans, or Romans versus other Romans, which there was a lot of, then the sources that we have are Roman histories, even which sometimes were written by Greeks, right? And there's no like non-Western dimension to that that's particularly significant. But on the other hand, when you start talking about like Greeks versus Persians, on the other hand, then yeah, that's a factor. That's a factor that can skew the history. A wonderful non-wargaming example is the movie 300, and I do know it's based on a Frank Miller comic, but it's very faithful to the comic in this regard. I'm not sure, I'll get to this in a minute, but I'm not sure if the framing device that kind of saves it is in the comic or if it's something unique to the movie. Where the Greeks are these heroic, cut, airbrushed individuals with beautiful beards and all this stuff, and the Persians are these weird mutants and evil wizards and stuff. And boy, that's got some uncomfortable connotations. But on the other hand, at least the movie is set up with a framing device so that the movie that you are watching is David Wenham telling Greeks before a later battle about the battle at Thermopylae. So it's not the story that happened, it's the story that David Wenham's character is telling, and that's why that's why it looks so fanciful, right? And I'm not sure if that's a framing device that was present in the comic or not. I went to see 300 in the theater and fell asleep during the movie. It is, in my opinion, a visually cool looking and narratively empty film. It's certainly an attractive movie. A lot of those modern battles, quad games, have not really been dealt with elsewhere. Maharaja, that's interesting. So that wasn't that basically Britannia in India, as I recall? I do remember the game. Carl Creeder, thanks for stopping by. If I haven't missed you, which I probably have. Now, I thought I read a snippet that somebody posted somewhere about Mark Herman's first game being October War. I would have to go look at the history. I don't know. I do know that on the next war, he was not credited as a designer on the box. Jim Dunnigan was. Mark Herman was credited as the developer. So, and that is the only one that I can specifically recall the credit for. I'm not sure how this came up because I missed it in the chat because the chat is fighting me every step of the way here. But Kaiser Bill mentions Flat Top, which I agree is a fabulous game. I would personally have loved to have seen vast coverage of the war in the Pacific using the flat top system. I would have been delighted to see that, and I hope that we do see that. I have high hopes for the Southern Cross game from Compass, and I hope that it is as awesome as flat top. And if it is, then I absolutely hope that we see tons of new volumes and scenarios and all that stuff that we unfortunately never got to see for flat top for whatever reason. All right, I think we've got almost all the Chinese done at this point. Stigler, yeah, that's a Jim Dunnigan design. Up against the wall, beep, that's a Jim Dunnigan design. And that's, speaking of games about civil unrest and stuff, that is what that is. So folks that say, oh yeah, SSPI was run by all these old dudes that weren't like the least, yeah, man, I'm not sure that Jim Dunnigan was completely detached from that. There is a game called King Philip's War. I know that, Dale Brady. Whether it's any good or not, I cannot comment. Late Bronze Age collapse games. So part of the problem, so that is actually covered in Cradle of Civilization from Compass. The Late Bronze Age collapse. It's actually the game covers that period. To what extent it works, I have no idea because I haven't played it yet. Part of the problem is a total lack of documentation based on why. I mean, this is why the Late Bronze Age collapse is a huge mystery because all the civilizations that wrote stuff down collapsed, or we have some writings from that period that we cannot read. So I think this game looks very interesting too, by the way. All right. King's Philip War system was also applied. This is just a guard saying. Thanks for stopping by the way. I watched your latest video on... Am I putting these in the right bag? Nope. Galicia 1914. And now, thank you. I know I don't have to buy it. Roma Victrix might be interesting. I don't know. I mean, I tend to want detailed simmy type games for Ancients, and I don't know that Roma Victrix is that. So take that for what it's worth. That's just my taste. We'll go for some markers here so we don't have to think very hard about it. It is 9:30 actually already, so we're moving good. I don't know that I'm going to finish clipping this thing tonight. There are actually a lot of counters here. The Pequot War. Yeah, I don't know anything about that either. I mean, I've heard of it, but that's it. Red Sun Rising. Are we talking, when we say Red Sun Rising, are we talking about the TSR Red Sun Rising? Or was that... I'm thinking of the Tom Clancy thing. Maybe that's a different one. Red Sun Rising, Russo-Japanese War. I am clearly thinking of a different game, so never mind. Ignore me, please. So, from watching Just DeGard's video, which I do recommend you watch, it looks like it is a different but familial resemblance type system to the 1914 system. It's definitely a lot simpler, but it looks like the victory conditions are just busted, and therefore, despite being interested in Mike Resch and a Galicia game, it looks like I don't need it. I, on the other hand, do have Serbian Musterbian and very much want to play it, actually. It's a very interesting topic, and I really like the looks of those games. Those games are doing some very interesting things with command and control. I am not sure Patchwork Pictures. I think that topic is. I think that you are right. I have heard that, but I don't think there's any chance that that is actually true. Now, was the Late Bronze Age collapse a general collapse to the extent that it is sometimes believed? Maybe not, but something happened in that period. It wasn't nothing. And while a lot of the chronology of that historical period does hang on the Egyptian pharaoh lists, not all of it does. There are other sources for that. So, Plains War. That's not the title. I forget what it's called. Pure Plains War, something like that. I'm not really interested in that, to be honest. So I don't really have an opinion on that. Jeff mentions Mark Herman 1977 games. Battle for Jerusalem, 1967. Is that October War? Raid, I remember. Red Sun Rising. Okay, that's the one. That's the one we're talking about up thread then. So gotcha. So I mean, he was around even at the time. So Mr. Herman, that is. Maybe when we're finished with this, we'll cruise over to Board Game Geek and take a look at Mark Herman's thing. There is a lot of YouTube content. There's a lot. Let's face it. There's a lot of YouTube content on any topic. You know, you're here after all. But there is a bunch of videos on the Late Bronze Age collapse. I can tell you that, including a couple of quite good detailed ones too. Plains and Indian War. That might be the one I'm thinking of. I mean, I got a lot going on. I got a lot going on right now. Let me put it that way. Also, one of the topics that we're going to get back to next week, by the way, this is first year. We're going to have a special guest, so stay tuned for that announcement later in the week. So there might be clipping, and there will definitely be consumption of whiskey, but there will also be a special guest. I would also like to remind people that the Armchair Dragoons digital convention is coming up. There is a link to that in the video description of this video. I want to say it's been at least a week since I've asked Brant this question, but I believe it is $5 for the whole event, regardless of how many things you participate in. So it is definitely worth your money. And I believe it to be worth your time as well. There are some very interesting events occurring at that event. I will be doing the opening kickoff on Friday, the 18th. I think it's the 18th, at I believe 6 p.m. I have now confirmed, I think, that I can do that with this new job responsibilities. Nobody's told me exactly what hours they expect me to be there, so I'm taking it upon myself to do 8 to 5. So that is what we're doing right now. I am pretty sure that these few counters are as far as I'm going to get in this process tonight. There's a lot of pieces to this thing. So they're big counters, but there's a lot of pieces. Polis looks actually quite interesting. That's another thing. The topic of that campaign in Galicia is covered by 1914 Twilight in the East, also a Michael Resch design. That is a far larger and significantly more complicated game. At one point I had Offensiva Outrance and Serbian Musterbian, and despaired of getting my hands on Twilight in the East, so I think I sold. I put them both up for sale, and I sold Offensiva Outrance, which had the Liege expansion from C3I in it. By the way, if anybody has that Liege expansion from C3I, I think issue 28 or 29, please email me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com, because I I'm not willing to pay a ton of money for it. It's not worth that much, but I'd like to have the Liège expansion. Because I had it before. So then my buddy sold a bunch of stuff off, including all 3 of the games, so I ended up with Offensive Outrance again and Twilight in the East, which at some point will probably pop into the counterclipping stream as the counterclipping game. Possibly for a month, because it's pretty big. It's not a monstrously expensive game, but it runs $150 or so. And I didn't pay that, so I'm happy. There's tons of games on Tannenberg. Tons of games on the topic of Tannenberg. There's a standalone Der Weltkrieg game on Tannenberg, plus it's included in the East Front volume. So no shortage on Tannenberg games. I'm going to use, I think, this snack bag to store all the unpunched counters. The Liège expansion is basically adds a couple of turns to the beginning of the game. It gives you an alternate campaign start. That's basically what it is. So it's not like it doesn't add to the end. It just adds like 2 or 3 turns to the beginning of the game, so you can actually play out that Liège stuff. But for the sake of having it all, I'd like to have it. And I do have the counter sheet coming. Whatever, I don't know if it's an expansion counter sheet or correction counter sheet. I know there's living rules for all that on the Oregon Consim's website and all that stuff. So, October War designer Irad B. Hardy, not Mark Herman. Irad B. Hardy did some interesting designs and quite influential designs, actually. I think. He was the late Irad B. Hardy, I will point out. I think he was an underappreciated designer. Who did I see as an early D&D designer of D&D modules? David James Ritchie. Did not realize that was in fact the case. Some of the old TSR D&D modules or AD&D modules have David James Ritchie as one of the authors. Did not find that. So, gave you a warning for anybody who's interested in this kind of thing. You can, as some folks are probably aware, obtain PDF versions of a lot of the old D&D modules on Drive-Thru-RPG. And many of them are available in a print-on-demand version. Now, it's not the same as the old one. It's just a booklet, right? You don't have the little folio with the cover and all that stuff. There are also, shall we say, slightly shady buyers on eBay who are selling those print-on-demand versions, hoping people don't catch it, for about 100% to 150% markup. So, buyer beware if you're in the market for any of that stuff. Make sure you're getting what you think you're getting and not some $8 reprint for $22. So, bear in mind. I'd have to look up October War. Jeff, are you getting that credit from BGG or from October War itself? Because I don't trust BGG when it comes to that kind of stuff. I mean, they're right 99% of the time, but not 100% of the time. I've caught them pants down on some mistakes. So, all right. So now we're in relaxation mode here for the remaining 20 minutes or so. So, I do have a video for tomorrow, which is not yet edited. I hope to get it. So I may not make the normal 10 a.m. release time, but there will be an RPG video tomorrow. We will be streaming with Dan Pencaldi on Wednesday. I have to check to see whether that's here or on No Enemies Here's channel. I think it's on Dan's channel and not here. But let me verify that. No, I think it's here. I think it's here. Okay, never mind. So on one of the two channels, we'll be broadcasting on Wednesday, and then on Thursday we will have an unboxing, which is also not edited yet. Will be Cradle of Civilization, which I have to tell you is not a game I was incredibly enthusiastic about. After opening it and looking at it, I am significantly more interested in it. I'm not really that into the Alexander versus Persia thing, but the other one, Sumeria to Persia, looks fairly interesting. I am not going to look up. I'll look it up on BGG, and I don't think I have a copy of October War. So there's that. BGG does say I read B. Hardy, though. I can tell you that. Jeff, yes, the only way I figured it out was looking at at last week to see if it was on Dan's channel or mine. So I read B. Hardy also did War in Europe, based on the War in the East design. And I think was sole credited designer on War Between the States, which I have a lot of issues with. I've played the Decision version. I do not feel that, and the Decision version is basically the SPI version. It's one of those, right, where it's basically, errata and all. It's the SPI version. I think it's got some significant problems, but I also think it's got some really interesting things going on. I think there was some really neat and novel things in that design that were later picked up by the much better game, the victory game Civil War by Eric Lee Smith. I think I can see the influence there. So I do think that Terry Hardy was a really interesting designer, actually, that whose games are generally worth looking at. Not all of which necessarily hold up today, but Highway to the Reich looks like one of his too, or at least he was involved. Firefight, which is not a game I was ever interested in at any point, was Outreach his too? I think so. Yeah. Yep. Outreach was his too, and I think that's SPI's best science fiction game by like a lot. I know there's people that disagree because they don't like the bookkeeping, and there is bookkeeping, but I like that game a lot. I think it's a really interesting and unique game. There's a bunch of interesting and unique games in here. The old Punic Wars game, the South Africa game, which is an interesting game. War in the Pacific, he was credited on too, but I think there's some other people also credited on War in the Pacific. That's something I haven't played, but I want to get to someday. Recently picked up, there's a video on that, so check that out. We started playing Traveler on Sunday. We have a 4 players and a GM group. And we're not... there may be a game on this Sunday, but I can't make it. I have an appointment on Sunday. So, but it was a lot of fun. It was almost all character interaction for what we did. But don't take my word for anything, man. Look it up. Verify. Trust but verify. If I'm sure, I'll phrase it in a way that says I'm sure. But somebody talked about October War in the context of Mark Herman online recently, and maybe I'm getting something mixed up. That's plausible. Doug Sunset says South Africa is the worst game that SPI ever published. I'm not questioning that. I actually have a copy of South Africa. It looks interesting. I mean, I don't know that it's good, but it's an interesting topic. It's like the race war in South Africa, pretty much. The Star Force star map is awesome. It's one of the best things about Star Force, and it is fantastically out of date. There is a shitload of additional dim red dwarfs and brown dwarfs and stuff found in the immediate stellar neighborhood in the last 10 or 20 years, let alone 30 or 40 since Star Force came out. The same problem exists with the similarly awesome star map in Traveler 2300 or 2300 AD. The difference there is that the presence of additional stars within a 20 light-year radius of Sol actually breaks the setting because of the way faster than light travel works in 2300 AD. So the new version that's coming out, or the last new version that came out already from Mongoose, actually has this old star map, because the new one would break the setting. So started looking at, I don't have my D&D stuff, it's not here, it's in the storage unit. But I started looking, and you'll see the video tomorrow on the Goodman Games Borderlands book. Some of the old D&D modules, I think, are interesting. Noble Knight ships for free for 150 bucks. Cool Stuff in Miniature Market shipped for free for 100. FYI on that. Definitely Cool Stuff has a tiny fraction of the amount of stuff that Noble Knight has. I will tell you that. I actually looked at, with the birthday monies a couple weeks ago, I looked at Cool Stuff, trying to come up with $100 worth of stuff I wanted to buy from them, and I could not find $100 worth of stuff I wanted from Cool Stuff. I've ordered several big packages of war games, but the fact is that they can't reliably keep anybody in stock that's in the wargaming space except for GMT. Maybe Academy Games, but I don't really buy anything from Academy Games, which should not be taken as a commentary about Academy Games in any way. I have played and do like at least a couple of things that they've done. But they're like war game type games I tend not to like. I'm just not into those kind of games. So I find that Noble Knight, or not Noble Knight, which I have ordered from relatively recently, I don't think at this point I have any reason to even check the Cool Stuff website anymore. Let me put it that way. I mean, they have RPG stuff, but again, they don't keep anything in stock except for D&D. So why bother? I can get D&D stuff from Amazon at as big a discount as from Cool Stuff, and Cool Stuff has good prices. I mean, their prices are pretty good. Miniature Market's the same way, except I think their selections is somewhat better than Cool Stuff, except that sometimes Cool Stuff has MMP stuff, and Miniature Market does not carry MMP. But my go-to MMP source is NWS, where I get better prices than either place. So, if I was ordering GMT stuff, I would probably order from Cool Stuff or Miniature Market. Let me put it that way. But normally nowadays, I buy it from GMT. I mean, I get it from P500, so it just shows up. And then if I'm missing something, I'll get it from Enterprise Games, which is a rep of GMT. So they rep GMT at Origins on the show floor. So they have a really good GMT selection, and which includes everything that they have that's available, and some stuff that's not available anymore. A lot of my Great Battles of History titles came from Enterprise Games. Let me put it that way. They have a website, enterprisegames.com, so check that out if you're interested. Their prices are fair. I don't know that I've seen anything on Enterprise's website. They're not necessarily cheap, but they're fair. I don't know that I've seen anything on Enterprise's website where I said to myself, wow, that's just fantastically out of line. I have said that with Noble Knight. That's not necessarily true of everything. I've bought plenty of stuff from them at very reasonable prices as well. But like super high ticket items, like things like Campaign for North Africa and the shrink wrap or something like that, they want like $1,000 for it. So, I mean, that's a crazy item too. It's a crazy rare piece. So, Noble Knight also has a huge want list, by the way, of stuff they will buy at a bit of a premium, so keep an eye on that. I've got a discount at Cool Stuff, too. One of the things that Cool Stuff does that's cool, is, like, you get points, and then the points kind of roll over into this discount. Miniature Market has something similar, too. So that you get, like, a 1 or 2% off or something like that on future orders if you keep buying stuff from them. So that's nice. I actually, Mike, I have had very good luck with the Enterprise Games search function. The list function is bullshit. However, stuff will show up in weird orders if you try to sort by publisher or whatever. You'll look for SPI and you'll find the SPI only to find that hundreds of lines later there's a bunch more SPI stuff. But I've had good luck with the search part of it. So I'll chastise Don about that next time I see him. So, well, I am pre-ordering less than I had pre-ordered. So what do I have on pre-order? I have without going through it line by line, I have a couple things on pre-order from Compass. I have a whole huge pile of stuff on pre-order from GMT. I have one or two things on pre-order from Legion. There's an oddball something from somewhere. I no longer have any outstanding wargaming Kickstarters since War and Peace showed up. There's some RPG stuff. The big RPG Kickstarter last year for Traveler was the Deep Night Revelation set. It is stuck in customs. So that should be showing up soonish, but it depends how long it takes to clear customs. So we are still talking about October War in the chat here. So it sounds like I need to get Mark Herman on so we could talk about October War and the story behind October War. I can't get Terry Hardy on, unfortunately. He has passed away. Steven Reynolds says he believes Cool Stuff owns Quartermaster Logistics, and they seem to be trying to make money there and not keep so much inventory in their stores. Well, that's fine, but I ain't going to order it if they don't have it, so that means that I buy less from Cool Stuff than I might otherwise. Because, like I said, their prices are good. Patchwork Pictures, I was at one point watching... I was subscribed to the channel, the Dice Tower channel at one point, but then the Hamtag guys left and went and did their own thing, and I didn't have any reason to stay subscribed to the Dice Tower anymore, because whenever they would do, like, the regular Dice Tower folks would do a wargame video, they would talk about games that weren't war games. And I'm gonna encourage everyone to not get hung up on that, but I also didn't need to watch those videos anymore. So I wish Tom nothing but the best. And he's the biggest board game guy on YouTube, I believe. So he's doing good. Quartermaster Logistics ship Kickstarter stuff. Well, tell him to ship my Traveler shit, will ya? Like I said, it's shipped. It's stuck in customs. That's the story, along with a bunch of other Traveler stuff. Some of which I actually also have on order. Glorious Empire is stuck, which I didn't pre-order, which I should have. Aliens of Charted Space 1 and 2, which I've done videos on. Those are both stuck in customs, and they have been stuck in customs. They were on a previous boat. So we're waiting for all that stuff. The Deep Night Revelation stuff is like a box set and 6 hardcovers, so I'm like super pumped about it. I have all the PDFs. I've looked at all the material and read it relatively closely, so I will have a lot of good commentary when unboxing time rolls around for the Deep Night Revelation stuff. But I don't know when it's going to show up. English people are already unboxing the thing. No, it was not a hint. I have no relationship with Mark Herman whatsoever. Was I on somebody's show with Mark Herman at one point? I don't think so. So no. I was not actually hinting. But that would be the way around that to find out, what was the story with October War. And Mark would probably be like, why are you asking about this of all the things? I mean, Mark's got a lot of interesting things going on. To me, the most interesting of which is the new Pacific War, which I am monumentally excited about. I am less interested in Rebel Fury, which is the last thing I've seen him post playtesting pictures of. That is the Gettysburg system from the C3I Gettysburg game from a few, whatever that was, 2 or 3 years ago now. I didn't like that game. I didn't think that game... I don't think it's a bad game, but it is really chess-like, and I don't like chess. I thought that the Waterloo game was much more interesting, and it was at a scale that made it more interesting, even though it uses a fairly similar system. It also has more moving pieces than the Gettysburg game. I don't know if that same criticism will be the case with the the battles in Rebel Fury. It might not be. And it's going to have Rick Barber maps. Rick Barber U.S. Civil War Chickamauga map. I mean, I almost want to buy it for that, to be honest. So, I always loved the Hamtag videos. They were an early influence on me, even though I've never done anything remotely like what Hamtag was doing. I always avidly watched all those videos, whether they were on the Dice Tower channel or whether they're over on Bonding with Board Games or wherever else they've popped up. So I unsubscribed to Bonding with Board Games too, because so much of what they're doing is not wargame related. But I will absolutely watch new Hamtag videos. No problem with that whatsoever. If there are going to be new Hamtag videos. We are almost done for the evening. It is 10 p.m. So, let's take a quick look at how we did tonight. Looks like we topped out at 91. We had a kind of short week. We still had like 65 people, which is a lot of people, last Monday. But then I realized after the fact, because somebody told me, it was like Memorial Day, right? I'm like, oh, yeah, that's true. So there's that. But we had a lot of people here tonight. And so I keep track of a variety of statistics from the channels, including the, maximum concurrence, and then like when the stream's over with, how many people watched, which is like three or four times that number. Wow. Charles Latorra mentions this 3+ hour unboxing. That might be worth at least looking at the video. I don't know that I want to sit through 3 hours of people unboxing tiddlywinks type things. But I mean, they do some things that are considered war games by some people as well. What they don't do, and I'm talking not about the Hamtag guys who definitely do games that are in my wheelhouse. I'm talking about like Tom and those other guys, those other folks that Liz Davidson has done stuff for the Dice Tower too, I think, and she does stuff that's in my wheelhouse. But a lot of they just weren't covering stuff I was interested in. So, John Longshore unsubscribed from Marco because he loves everything. So that's a thing that I hear from time to time, is that, so and so loves everything. They don't do reviews, and I mean, so bear in mind the formats of different channels, right? So you have Marco does reviews, right? Marco frames his content as reviews, and the not the Dice Tower, but the Players Day does a lot of this too, where they do a lot of reviews, and I absolutely understand why a like YouTube team, one person or multiple people, has no enthusiasm to do a review on a game that is shitty, because it's a lot of work to put these things together. So if it seems like Marco likes everything, I'm guessing that's not that. I've seen negative reviews from Marco, but I'm guessing that is because you never see the reviews of games that Marco didn't like. Same thing with the Player's Aid and with other folks that do a lot of reviews. I have the advantage of having a different format than either Marco or the Player's Aid or whoever are doing. I don't really do reviews, and I'm going to go out of my way to say this is not a review, but I think this game is shitty, right? And I'll tell you that, but that's not a review. I'm not necessarily giving you a well-founded explanation for why I think that game is bad. But if I seem more free with that opinion, that's why. It's not that I like less stuff than them. It's that their content is more aimed at the things that they liked, because that's what they're enthused to make videos about. And I completely sympathize with that perspective. Now, Marco covers a lot of games that I also don't care about, to be honest. I watched one of Marco's reviews for something not that long ago, a war game not that long ago, and I found it a very valuable and insightful overview. So Joe Stedman's still around, but I haven't seen Joe do a video in ages. I should be still subscribed to Joe. I know Dan talks to him periodically. Also, it rained all day today, and it is incredibly humid and gross in here right now. And yes, the air conditioning's been running the entire time. So there's that. Yeah, I'm thinking specifically of the Dice Tower's top 10 war games list, of which I'm not the right person to ask this question. Of the 30 games listed in the Dice Tower's top 10 war games list, how many of them were war games? I'm going to say that from memory, I can't recall. Probably 0 of them were war games by my way of thinking. But I don't mean they were 0 war games. I mean they were 0 games that I was interested in. And that's kind of my definition, is if I'm interested in it as a war gamer, then it's a war game. If I'm interested in it as a role-playing gamer, it's a role-playing game, right? So that is a completely facetious definition, and a definition that is not in any way useful for you, the viewer. But nevertheless, that's why I make these decisions sometimes to not watch somebody's channel anymore, because they're just not covering games that I'm interested in. So anyway, U-Boat we will not be covering on this channel. I am sure that there is ample coverage of U-Boat on YouTube already. I will say that I think I saw Jim Ozarski say this recently, that he feels, and I having played neither game but looked at and watched videos on both games, I think I am probably going to agree with him to the limits of my understanding that Captain Sonar is probably the far more interesting U-Boat game than U-Boat. I think that is almost certainly true. Captain Sonar I've seen played, and it looks like a scream. And I encourage folks to look video up about Captain Sonar. There's also a simplified version, I think, just called Sonar, but Captain Sonar is the one to look at. I think that's the more interesting one. I'd call Memoir 44 a war game. I've played Memoir 44 3 times, and I've had a negative experience every time. That may be scenarios. Maybe I just keep playing it at Origins, and the people that run those events pick terrible scenarios. That's possible. But I have never had fun playing Memoir 44, even though I like the system and have had fun with Napoleonics and Ancients. I have not had fun in World War II. Anyway, we are going to wrap up for the evening. We will have a show next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Tune in Wednesday here on this channel. I'll have this card for this up in the next day or two. Things are crazy right now. For Wednesday's show at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, there's a topic. I have no idea what the topic is. I have completely forgotten. A lot going on. And then, again, tomorrow there'll be an RPG video, which might be later in the day than the usual 10 a.m., but it'll show up tomorrow. And then Thursday we'll have the unboxing video of Cradle of Civilization. So I'm trying to get Liz on for our Wednesday show. She had a scheduling problem, so I was not able to swing that yet. I'm still working on it. So anyway, I would like to thank everybody for watching. Please do check out the Patreon and merch store links and all that jazz in the video description. If anybody who's watching and is not subscribed, which is unlikely, please do subscribe to the channel, like the videos and all that stuff. Share them around, blah, 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 blah. Thanks again.